Hello everyone, it's Lisa Tilson here for Hero Arts, and today I'm going to be making a shaker using the Candy Canes toss-up stencils. So this is a set of 3 layering stencils. I'm actually just going to be using the first 2 of those stencils for my card today. Okay, so I'm starting off by taping a piece of ultra pink cardstock down onto my work surface. I'm just holding that in place with some low tack tape. Now I'm going to place that first stencil down on top and just securing that at the sides. So I'm going in now with some ultra pink core ink, and I'm making sure that I go over those tiny little squares that you can see in all 4 corners of that stencil. These are used as a way of helping you line up each of the layers of stencils. So in this case, as I mentioned before, I'm just using 2 layers, but if I add ink into those tiny little squares, I'm going to be able to really easily see where to line up my next stencil. So taking stencil number 2 now, just lining that up with those little 4 squares, and I'm going to tape that down knowing that it is perfectly aligned with what I have underneath. So I'm going to be using some glitter paste for my second layer. And I want to have quite a light layer of glitter paste, so I haven't removed loads from that tub, and I'm just going to apply that now through the stencil. So just moving quite carefully. I actually move in all different directions, but I am quite careful to make sure that I don't lift that stencil at all. I should have really taped it at the top and the bottom as well, but I was careful and didn't lift it. That of course increases the risk of you getting paste underneath. I'm going to quickly take that glitter paste off my palette knife, and I soaked my stencils as well in some water. So just removing that tape now, and I'm going to very carefully lift the stencil up so that I don't smudge any of that glitter paste. And I'm going to set that to one side to dry and work on my sentiment now. So these are the Candy Cane Season Etch dies. You have an outline die and also a shadow die. So I'm going to die cut the shadow from vellum, and I'm going to cut the outline die from 4 different colours of cardstock. I'm using Kiwi, Cherry, Paradise and Ultra Pink. So I've run all those through my Platinum 6 die cutting machine, and I'm now just going to remove the tape from that shadow die, and you can see that's cut through the vellum perfectly. And I'm now just going to pop out the letters from the back of that outline die, and I will have everything ready to start assembling that sentiment now. So I've worked out which coloured letters I want to use, and now I'm going to go ahead and adhere those onto the vellum. Because I'm using vellum, I want to make sure that I only add a tiny bit of glue onto the back of each letter. So I pop some precision glue on, and I tap it off onto some scrap paper before I press that down onto the vellum. That will really help me reduce any glue seeping out from under those letters, and if you do get some, you can just remove it with the edge of your tweezers. And I'm just repeating the process with the letter A, adding the glue onto the back, tapping it off onto my scrap paper, just enough so that it will still stick to the vellum, and not too much so that it will seep out. And I do the same with the N as well, and I'm just going to work my way through this off camera, so you don't need to see me add all the letters onto this vellum background. It's quite a therapeutic process adding these letters on, and what I tried to do is just make sure that I had an even amount of each colour. I think with the pink I ended up with 3 instead of 4, but as a lot of the card is pink, that didn't matter too much. And that's how it looks at the end. So we're just going to set that to one side and work on some extra embellishments for our card. This is the Candy Cane Swag Stamp and Cut set. I'm just going to use the holly leaves and the berries. So just going to take those out of the packaging and put those down onto some white cardstock. And just picking those 3 stamps up with my Misty, and I'm now going to add some cherry core ink onto the berries. I will actually double stamp the berries. My ink pads are quite new and very juicy, and sometimes I think it's helpful to do a double stamp just to make sure that I get really even coverage. You can't notice it on film, but in real life I think you can notice it, and I just want to make sure that looks as even as possible. So I'm taking some green apple core ink now, and I'm just going to ink up those 2 holly leaves. Again, my ink pad is new, so I'm going to do a double stamp on those, and then I'm going to add some darker ink just to give those 2 leaves a little bit of variation. So I'm taking the Fresh Lawn core ink and just applying it to the bottom ends of those 2 stamps. I run my finger over the edge of that just to blur it a bit so that I don't get any lines when I go to stamp that down. And again, I repeat the process with that darker ink. So that darker ink is the Fresh Lawn. So just blurring the edges a little bit before I press that down, and that's how they now look. So I'm just going to add the coordinating dies on top and run that through my die cutting machine. They didn't take long to do these stamped images, and they look nice on the final card. So now that my glitter paste panel is dry, I'm taking the largest die from Nesting Rectangle Infinity Dies, just lining that up. I'm going to take that down and run it through the die cutting machine. And now I'm taking a smaller rectangle, which is just going to cut out a window from the centre of that panel, and this is going to be the start of us creating the shaker element. So I've got a piece of acetate there. I'm just adding some glue around that window on the back side of that panel, and I'm just going to press that acetate down. I do actually tap this off now onto some scrap paper just before I put the acetate on top, so that I'm trying to avoid any seeping through, but I do actually get a little bit that comes through onto the front of the window, so just using some tweezers there to take that off. So that's the start of our shaker created. I'm now going to add my foam tape. I'm using some thin foam tape, but I will add 2 layers of this just so that I get the dimension I need. So just cutting some strips and adhering those around that window, and I'll now going to go ahead and cut some thinner strips just to make sure the whole of the back of that panel is covered. I'm going to remove the backing tape now, and I'm just going to add another layer on top. So when I add this second layer, I am actually only removing the backing tape from the first layer just before I add that second layer down. If I was to take it all off in one go, my fingers and wrists would be sticking to that lower layer of tape. So that's how that's now looking. And now it's time to add all the pretty sequins. So I've just taken a couple of different varieties from my stash, and using a triangle tray, I'm just popping those into the shaker well and just moving them about so that that layer is fairly flat. And now I've got all my sequins in place, I can go ahead and remove the backing tape from the foam tape. And I'm making sure that I'm really careful here not to send those sequins all over my work surface. Again, just pressing those down so they're flat, and taking a top folding white A2 note card, and I'm just going to press that down over the back of that shaker window with the sequins inside, and that's going to trap them and keep them in place. So just pushing that down so it's sealed really nicely, and that's the shaker element finished. I've got a small white slither of cardstock showing there, so I just trimmed that off with a paper trimmer. We're now going to go ahead and add our sentiment onto that window. And I'm adding tiny bits of precision glue to the back of the letters that you can see showing through that vellum. I want to make sure I don't get any on the vellum itself, or it will be visible. So I kept that to the areas where you can see the letters, and I'm just going to press that down now onto that acetate panel and hold it in place until it's stuck firmly. And to finish the card, we're going to now add on those two little holly leaves and berries. So just adding those on with precision glue, tapping off the excess before I place that down. And now just finishing off with those three tiny little berries. That brings us to the end of the card. I really love all the sparkle you get from the glitter frame and also from those sequins in the middle. I do hope that you like the card and that you found today's video helpful. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that you have a great day. Bye for now.